Tua's off learning jujitsu to learn how to fall. So that's what we've kind of learned over the past for real. He's actually he's taking this seriously. He's getting into it to try to learn, I guess, better how to protect himself and specifically to protect his head. And somebody said something interesting, and I don't know if there's validity to this or not, but it kind of made sense in my brain, which is that maybe the hip injury at times that he's trying to protect the hip when he falls. And so like by doing that, he kind of falls with his upper body, and he's ended up landing on his head a few times. And, whatever it is, I give him credit because he's turning over every leaf to try to figure out a way to fix it. And the team believes in him. And look, I think the things that we've seen from him, and I heard you in the last segment talking about the importance of a franchise quarterback. I think he's shown, and I think they believe, that when healthy, he can be a franchise quarterback and would be a franchise quarterback if he could stay healthy. And I'm saying that over and over again because I think that is job number one, which is figuring out a way to protect himself. And so to your second question about will he be ready for the start of the season? Yes, 100%, absolutely. I think he'd be able to play if they had to play a game tomorrow. And the thing that I think there's a misconception out there, what they have said, and we actually, our executive producer's father is actually literally a brain surgeon. So we've kind of picked his brain on this a little bit. And what he has said, which I think kind of flies in the face of a lot of common thinking, is if you've had one concussion, it's not that you're more prone to getting another one. Now, what I think there are two major concerns. Number one, if you have multiple concussions within a short period of time, which Tua did, that's when the concerns start to creep in quite a bit. And then the other question, I think, is the long term. If you have another concussion within a year, is there more long-term impact on that? And I think that would be the major concern. I don't think it's that he's more prone to having another concussion. It's that what would the long-term effects of it be if he does suffer another one? So I think all that to say, week one, he's going to be the starting quarterback for this team. I think they're going to work really hard to try to make sure that he stays on the field. And I know the Tom Brady question is out there, so let's get to it. The thing that I had heard the other day, which I think is interesting, is the idea that, okay, let's say that the Dolphins bring him in some sort of an ownership capacity, that there's some sort of an extra role there, and he's standing up there in Stephen Ross's ownership box, and they just happen to be watching a game in which Tua Tagavailoa does get hurt. What do you think's going to happen? I mean, if Tom Brady is just sitting up there in the ownership box, do you really think they're going to turn to Skylar Thompson, or do you think Brady's going to get the edge? And so I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. It's not just, hey, they'd go out and they would sign him and ultimately bring him in and push Tua to the side. But if Brady is somehow involved in the organization in some capacity, it just feels like such a no-brainer that would be the direction that they would turn if something were to happen with Tua.
So being that they don't have any first-round picks, obviously, it seems like the Lamar Jackson thing is definitely out, at least for this year. But let's say they decline Tua's fifth-year option. Could you see Lamar Jackson as an option for Miami down the road? Because he has hinted at wanting to go there in the past.
Well, certainly, look, if I don't think any option would be off the table if something along those lines happened. Like if they decided ultimately to move on from Tua Tagovailoa, I think the one thing that we've seen from Stephen Ross, and this is why the Tom Brady conversation keeps happening, is he desperately wants to get that franchise quarterback. And, again, I think everybody is kind of in alignment right now within the organization that when healthy, Tua is the guy. But, a guy is the guy until he's not. And so if something does indeed end up happening where they decide to move on, yeah, I think that would clearly be a potential option. I think, I don't know that we'd have to see where things stand at that point. I don't think this team is going to go like the route of bottoming out again, like they did a couple of years ago. So yeah, Lamar Jackson would be an ideal option for that if he does end up playing under the franchise tag this season. Or the other thing I'd heard too was that because of the way the franchise stuff works, they could potentially, if this drags on until after the draft, then they could sign him to an offer sheet if no deal had been reached between Lamar Jackson and another team, or Lamar Jackson and the Ravens at that point. Because then, you have to have a first-round pick in the next draft in order to execute the franchise. Well, you don't have a first-round pick in this draft, but they would in the following draft. And so I think that's when they would be able to kind of pivot and take a look at that.